Ever feel like you're chasing this uh, mythical dream job? You know, the one where you just leap out of bed every morning, thrilled to do what you do.
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there at some point.
Well, today we're diving deep into whether that's even the right goal to have.
Interesting.
Like, is that whole idea just setting us up for disappointment?
Right.
Should we be aiming for something else entirely?
I think that's a great question, and it's something a lot of people struggle with.
And to tackle this, we're turning to Cal Newport's book, So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Oh, that's a good one.
A really insightful, yeah. He tells this story about Thomas, who dedicated his entire life to Zen Buddhism, landed his dream job living in a monastery.
That's idyllic.
Right. And it was a complete and utter bust.
Oh, wow. What happened?
Well, that's what's so interesting about this. Newport uses this story to point out that most people, they don't actually have these braining passions just waiting to be discovered.
I see.
And even when they do, like Thomas, it's no guarantee of happiness or even a decent career.
So passion isn't the be-all and end-all.
It might not be. And it's kind of counterintuitive, right? We're constantly told to find our passion. But what if it's not the magic bullet we've been led to believe?
I think that's a really important question to consider.
Absolutely. And to make things even more interesting, Newport cites data showing that workplace happiness is actually declining, even though we're all obsessed with loving what we do.
So something's not adding up here.
Right. It's like there's a missing piece of the puzzle when it comes to finding fulfilling work.
Definitely seems that way.
So if following your passion isn't the answer, then what is?
Well, Newport offers an alternative, the craftsman mindset.
The craftsman mindset.
Yeah, instead of searching for this pre-existing passion, what if you focused on becoming so good at a skill that people just can't ignore you?
Ah, I see. So like focusing on mastery.
Exactly. And it's not just Newport who advocates for this. Think about Steve Martin's famous advice, be so good they can't ignore you.
Right. Focus on the craft, not just the feeling. But does that really work?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Like, how do you go from practicing scales to a fulfilling career?
Well, Newport uses this example of Jordan Tice, this incredible bluegrass guitarist. His dedication of practice is insane. He'll spend hours in this bare-bones room perfecting a single technique just to get a song exactly right.
Wow.
It's not about loving every minute. It's about that relentless pursuit of mastery.
So it's about pushing yourself to become exceptional.
Yeah, pushing yourself to the point where your skills just can't be denied.
Okay, but even if you get really good at something, how does that actually translate into a job you actually want?
That's where this idea of career capital comes in.
Career capital.
Think of it as like your rare and valuable skills. It's the currency you use to trade for things that make a job great. Things like creativity, control, impact.
So the more valuable your skills, the more you have to bargain with.
Precisely. And to illustrate this, Newport uses the example of Steve Jobs. You know, he didn't start Apple out of some lifelong passion for computers.
Really?
It actually began with a lucky break, but the crucial part was that he had the technical skills to seize that opportunity.
I see.
And as his skills grew in value, so did his control over his work and its impact on the world.
It's like he leveled up, and the game changed because of it.
Yeah, exactly. But what about people who are already skilled? Like, they're good at what they do, but still feel stuck.
Right, they want more control but can't seem to get it.
Well, that's where Newport's control traps come into play.
Control traps?
Yeah, the first trap warns against demanding autonomy too early.
Before you've really earned it.
Exactly, before you've built up the career capital to back it up. He contrasts this woman named Jane, who quit college with a vague nonprofit idea and just totally floundered.
Oh, no.
With Joe Duffy, this logo designer, who honed his craft for years before going solo and was wildly successful.
So you need a solid foundation before building that dream freelance life or starting a company.
Absolutely. But then there's the second trap, which is almost a catch-22.
Oh.
Once you do have the skills for more control,
Right, you've proven yourself.
your current employer often pushes back because, well, they recognize your value.
Oh, I've been there. You're good enough to handle more responsibility, but they just keep piling on tasks without giving you any real ownership.
It's so frustrating. And Newport uses the example of Lulu, the software developer who constantly had to fight for autonomy even as she became more valuable to her employers.
So what's the solution then? If demanding control isn't the answer, how do you actually get to call the shots in your work life?
Well, Newport shares this great rule from Derek Sivers, an entrepreneur. He says, do what people are willing to pay for.
Do what people are willing to pay for.
And it's not just about the money, although that's a good indicator. It's about proving that your ideas have real-world value.
So test the waters before taking the plunge.
Exactly. And Severus himself, he became a musician and started this really successful online music store only after proving that people would pay for his offerings.
I like that. Take some of the pressure off finding that perfect path right away. But what about finding a sense of mission in your work? Isn't that important too?
Oh, absolutely. And Newport contrasts two different approaches to finding mission. He highlights Pardis Sabeti, this Harvard professor who's dedicated to combating ancient diseases.
Wow, that's incredible.
Right. But her path wasn't like a straight line. She mastered several areas of expertise before her mission became clear.
So it's not about having it all figured out from the start. It's about gaining those skills and knowledge that eventually lead you to your purpose.
Yes. And then he contrasts her with Sarah, a grad student who really struggled because she was searching for her mission before mastering any specific skills.
Because she was putting the cart before the horse.
Exactly. It's like she was trying to find the answer before even understanding the question.
That makes sense. You need a solid base of knowledge and experience before you can even know what problems you want to solve.
Absolutely.
So how do you go from, say, being a skilled coder to knowing you want to build apps for social good?
Well, Newport connects this to Stephen Johnson's idea of the adjacent possible.
The adjacent possible.
Basically, it means that breakthroughs, including finding your mission, usually happen just beyond the cutting edge of your field.
Interesting.
So the key is to get to that cutting edge first. Once you're there, your mission will likely become much clearer.
Okay, that's a really interesting way to think about it. So it's not about having some grand epiphany. It's about pushing yourself to become an expert.
Right.
And then letting your mission emerge from that expertise.
Exactly. And once you've got that foundation, Newport gets really tactical about how to actually apply these insights to your work.
Okay, I'm ready for some actionable advice.
Where do you start?
All right, so we've got the theory down, but let's see how these principles actually play out in the lives of some of the people Newport profiles in his book. Remember Thomas, the Zen monk, who had that pretty epic meltdown?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where did he end up after ditching the monastery?
Well, he actually took a job as a web developer.
Really?
Yeah, for a marketing agency in Berlin.
A web developer. So not exactly like finding inner peace, right?
It might seem like a random jump, but his monastery experience, believe it or not, it taught him a lot about focus and commitment.
Oh, okay. So even though his passion kind of fizzled out,
Yeah.
he was able to apply those skills in a new context.
Exactly. And as his web development skills improved, he actually got promoted, eventually landed a job with a bigger agency. That gave him more responsibility, more control. Ultimately, he even ended up running his own independent agency within that larger organization.
So he basically built his own mini empire within the system. That's impressive.
Yeah.
It shows that letting go of that follow your passion dogma, it can actually open up new and unexpected paths.
For sure.
Speaking of unexpected paths, let's talk about Joe Duffy, the logo designer who patiently built up his skills before making any big career leaps. He's such a great contrast to Jane, who jumped into the nonprofit world without a solid plan.
Right, right.
Joe's story really highlights that craftsman mindset in action, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He focused on getting really, really good at his craft, like before even thinking about striking out on his own.
Yeah, and as his logo designs became more and more sought after, he was able to kind of trade those skills for greater control over his work.
Yeah, he eventually ran a subsidiary within a large agency, and then eventually launched his own super successful design firm.
And let's not forget the part where he used his design earnings to buy a ski slope.
Oh yeah, Duffy Trails.
That's a level of career freedom most of us only dream about.
It really highlights the importance of financial viability too, right? Like, Joe didn't just chase a vague idea of freedom. He actually made sure that his work generated revenue, proving its real-world value. It's a good reminder that while money shouldn't be the only lie goal, it's definitely a solid indicator that you're on the right track.
Okay, so we've got the monk turned web developer, we've got the logo designer turned ski slope owner. What about someone in a more competitive winner-take-all field, like, say, Hollywood?
Yeah, well, Newport tells this story about Alex Berger, who initially thought he could just break into Hollywood with a bunch of diverse projects. But he kind of learned the hard way that in TV writing, it all boils down to one skill,
Right.
writing great scripts.
Okay, so he had to unlearn that auction market mentality.
Right.
and embrace the reality of this super competitive industry.
Exactly. And once he did that, he applied the same intense focus and dedication that he'd honed, actually, as a college debate champion
Oh, wow.
to his script writing. He worked on like multiple scripts at once, constantly sought feedback, pushed himself relentlessly.
He basically went full-on craftsman mindset.
Full on.
And did it pay off?
Absolutely. He went from being a script assistant to having his work produced on major network shows.
Wow.
He even co-created a show with Michael Eisner.
Talk about a meteoric rise. So from disillusioned monk to successful screenwriter, these stories really show how this craftsman mindset, it can work across different fields and different personalities.
For sure.
But what about that sense of mission? Did these folks start with a burning desire to, like, change the world, or did that come later?
It seems like the mission emerged organically for some.
Okay.
Like Thomas and Joe, for example. Thomas found satisfaction in just building great websites.
Mm-hmm.
Joe's mission became creating iconic brands.
So they weren't chasing some grand pre-existing purpose.
Yeah, it was more about them finding meaning and fulfillment in mastering their craft.
It's not always about starting with a mission statement. Sometimes it's about letting it unfold as you gain experience.
Absolutely.
Okay. But for someone like Pardee Sabeti, the Harvard professor fighting ancient diseases, mission was a more explicit driving force, right?
Right. But even for her, the path to that mission wasn't a straight line either. It took years of study and skill development before she could even articulate her mission.
Right. She went from studying biology to getting an MD.
Yeah.
To finally landing on computational genetics as her expertise.
It was only after reaching that certain level of mastery that her true mission really crystallized.
Like she needed that foundation of knowledge to really see the bigger picture. So how do you know when you've hit that point?
That's a great question.
Like when your expertise is strong enough to start revealing a mission.
And it's something Newport grapples with, too.
Yeah.
He actually uses his own story to illustrate how these principles play out in a field that's often seen as rigid and traditional academia.
Okay, so let's shift gears then.
Yeah.
And dive into Cal Newport's personal journey. He didn't exactly set out to become a, guru of meaningful work, did he?
Not at all.
He traces his aversion to the whole follow your passion mantra all the way back to high school. When he and his friend Michael, they started a web design company.
Oh, interesting.
And they weren't driven by some burning passion.
Okay.
They just wanted to make some extra cash.
So even the guy who wrote the book on finding fulfilling work, he started out with a side hustle.
That's pretty relatable.
Right, is.
And that experience taught him a really early lesson. You don't need some grand passion to build a successful and fulfilling career. It's about mastering a valuable skill and then using it to create opportunities.
Yeah.
And they did pretty well, too, even using their web design success to help them get into top colleges.
Sounds like they were way ahead of the curve on that whole online entrepreneur thing.
They were. And that pragmatic, skill-focused mindset, it continued to shape Newport's choices. In college, while his peers were stressing about, finding their calling, he focused on developing valuable skills. He even got known for hacking his study habits to get better grades with less effort.
So maybe he was a little obsessed with finding the most efficient path.
Right.
But I can relate to wanting to work smarter, not harder.
Me too.
Yeah, it's about optimizing your time and energy, achieving your goals without burning out. And when it came time to choose a career path after college, he had job offers from, get this, Microsoft and MIT.
Wow. That's the kind of decision that would give most people analysis paralysis.
Oh, yeah.
But Newport, he had a clear system.
Oh, so he wasn't swayed by the prestige of a big-name company like Microsoft?
Not at all. He analyzed each path, looking at potential career capital, opportunities for skill development, control, and impact.
So he approached it almost like an algorithm.
Very systematic.
Yeah.
So what did his career capital calculator tell him to do?
It pointed him toward MIT, which eventually led him down the path to academia.
Okay.
But here's the interesting part.
What's that?
Even within the structured world of academia, he applied his principles of building career capital and shaping his work.
So even in a field where you might think the path is pretty predetermined, he found ways to carve out his own space.
Yeah. How did he do that?
Yeah, how?
Well, early on, he recognized the importance of deliberate practice. That focused effort to constantly improve. He talks about forcing himself to work through complex mathematical proofs as a grad student.
Ugh, I can relate. Math proofs were definitely not my favorite part of college.
even when it was mentally exhausting.
But I see what you mean about pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
It's about that deep focus and the willingness to embrace discomfort. He knew that it was essential for mastering those concepts and advancing his research.
So he was building up his academic career capital, proving he could handle those really challenging theoretical problems. But did he have any, tricks for making deliberate practice less painful?
He did. He talks about setting aside dedicated blocks of time for focused work, tracking his hours to make sure that he was putting in the effort. He even used, get this, a special expensive notebook, just for brainstorming new ideas.
I love that notebook trick.
Right.
Tricking your brain into taking things more seriously. Did his mission emerge from all this deliberate practice?
It seems to have unfolded organically. He started writing about time management and productivity for students, which actually led to his first book. Then, as he researched So Good They Can't Ignore You, his mission kind of expanded to helping people find fulfilling work. It all built on his foundation of career capital, the credibility he'd earned through his research and writing.
So he wasn't just another self-help guru spouting platitudes.
Yeah.
He had the academic chops to back it up.
His story really emphasizes that you don't have to passively accept the status quo. You can actually shape your career, build those valuable skills, and create work that aligns with your values and aspirations.
I'm definitely feeling inspired, but I think it's time we get down to brass tacks. How can our listeners actually apply these principles to their own lives? Okay, I think we're ready to bring all this amazing insight back down to earth.
Right.
How can our listeners actually apply these principles to their own careers, whether they're, just starting out or feeling kind of stuck in a rut?
Well, Newport gives some really practical advice, and it starts with understanding the landscape of your field.
Okay.
The first question to ask yourself is, what type of career capital market am I in?
Okay, so define that for us.
Is it a winner-take-all market where one skill reigns supreme? Or is it more of an auction market where a unique blend of skills is key?
I can see how knowing the kind of the rules of the game is crucial before you even start building your skill set.
Absolutely. And once you've got that figured out, then you can identify your specific capital type.
Yeah.
What are the skills that are most valuable in your market?
So in an auction market, you have more room to be creative, right? You can combine different skills to really stand out.
Exactly. Think about Mike Jackson, who was able to blend his knowledge of carbon markets with entrepreneurial experience and created a really unique and highly sought after skill set.
It's about being strategic, figuring out what skills will give you the most leverage in your specific field.
Right.
Okay. So you've got your market, you've got your capital type. What's next on the checklist?
Well, step 3 is defining what good looks like in your chosen field.
Okay.
What are those concrete benchmarks you need to hit to actually be considered successful?
Okay, so have a goal in mind.
Yeah, think of Alex Berger's goal of writing a script strong enough to land him an agent in Hollywood. He had a clear target, which helped him really focus his efforts.
It's about having that clarity of purpose, knowing what you're aiming for so you can actually create a plan to get there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now comes the hard part.
A hard part.
Deliberate practice.
Yeah.
It's time to push past your comfort zone.
Right. Constantly stretching your abilities and seeking honest feedback.
Remember that stretch and destroy mentality we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah.
Embrace it, even when it's uncomfortable.
No pain, no gain, right.
But how do you make deliberate practice a regular part of your routine?
That's the thing, right.
Without getting totally overwhelmed.
Well, Newport talks about setting aside dedicated time for focused work, tracking your hours. Even, remember, using that special notebook for brainstorming?
Oh, yeah.
It's about creating a system that really works for you.
Those little rituals, they can make a big difference. Okay, so you've got your skills honed. You're pushing yourself to improve.
Right.
What about that sense of mission? How do you find work that not only pays the bills, but also feels meaningful?
Well, sometimes a mission emerges organically, as you master your craft.
Okay.
Other times it requires more deliberate exploration. And that's where those little bets come in. It's about experimenting, testing out different approaches, and just seeing what resonates with you.
Like Kirk French, who ended up hosting a show on the Discovery Channel, right?
Yeah.
He didn't just jump into television.
Right.
He tested out all these different ways to kind of popularize archaeology, from DVDs to documentaries, before finding that big break.
It's about embracing that experimental mindset, trying things out, learning from both the failures, you might be surprised by what you discover along the way.
So it's not about having all the answers right away. It's about being curious,
Yeah,
adaptable,
for sure.
and willing to take those calculated risks.
Exactly. This whole deep dive has really been about challenging those easy answers, questioning those well-worn platitudes about finding your passion, and embracing a more nuanced, empowering approach to work.
It's about taking ownership of your career, right? Holding those valuable skills and really crafting a path that truly aligns with your values and aspirations.
And remember, it's a journey. It's not a destination. There's no one right way to find fulfilling work.
It's about constant learning, adapting, and refining your approach as you go.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Cal Newport's So Good They Can't Ignore You, I want to leave you with this. What's one small step you can take this week to build your career capital or test an idea for your mission? Write it down, commit to it, and start building that remarkable career you've always dreamed of. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Hey, if you made it to the end of the video, thanks so much for listening. If you want to get the book for yourself, use the link in the description. If you're looking to level up your income, schedule a one-on-one with me to see if what I do might be right for you. Remember, like if you like the content and share so we can all become more book buff and life smart. Hey, if you made it to the end of the video, thanks so much for listening. If you want to get the book for yourself, use the link in the description. If you're looking to level up your income, schedule a one-on-one with me to see if what I do might be right for you. Remember, like if you like the content and share so we can all become more book buff and life smart.